us. Thanks for taking some time out of your day. We've got a esteemed guest with us. I'll introduce him in a minute, but the intent here is really to start, thinking about as the cyber security and risk profile of this industry in general evolves very rapidly and will continue to evolve rapidly. Really, we're starting to think about, as we go into next year, as you wrap up the calendar year over the next 3 months, and as you start to plan for next year in the business, what are some of the tactics? What are some of the things that are top of mind with some of our thought leaders that we know going into next year? What are the 5 tactics to think about going into next year? Give you some strategies and some risks to think about, and some maybe things to build into your cyber plan for next year. I'm joined by a longtime partner of ours and thought leader in the business, Jay Pasteris. He's the CIO and CISO at Green Pages Technology Solutions. He's also on our security advisory board. Jay, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Justin. Happy to be here. Appreciate it.
I know you've got folks in the Tampa area at one of your locations. I hope everybody's good down there. Sounds like that storm was a big one. So hopefully everybody's drying up and digging out of that. I'm sure the recovery is going to be quite extensive there. So hope everybody's good.
Yeah, they are. I've seen some crazy pictures they've sent up over the last few days, and it's pretty frightening what they went through.
Yeah. Anybody that's joining us from the Southeast or is on the Eastern Seaboard, hope things are going well. That storm is headed up the Eastern Seaboard, so I hope everybody's good. And again, thanks for taking some time. So Jay, we're really going to review, kind of a pretty simple agenda here, but one that, I think is pretty hard hitting. So we're going to talk about state of security today. We're going to get your inputs a little bit on how to tackle, what are the top things you think about in tackling cyber risk, not only for your own organization, as you serve as the CISO of Green Pages, but also, your clients' organizations and how you service clients and their cybersecurity risks. So Jay brings a unique perspective. He's chartered with protecting his own organization, and I'll have Green Pages explain a little bit, or Jay explain a little bit about what Green Pages is, but also, Green Pages is chartered with protecting a lot of their clients' environments. So he brings a unique perspective where he's looking at both. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll, a little call to action, some things to think about as you go into next year. And obviously, as Liz said, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box, drop them in the chat box. I'll monitor those. We'll take them as they come. But Jay, why don't you spend a minute there just to, give a snapshot of what Green Pages is, who you are, what you do,
Sure.
The organization, and what you focus on.
Yeah, so Green Pages is an MSSP. We're primarily Eastern Seaboard, although we do some European, right, and across the U.S. We have a heavy concentration on the East Coast. And really, we focus on a few things, right? The company is really focused on managed services, security, and cloud, right? And our customers tend to look at that as all in one, right? As a lot of things going on in business in organizations now, and they need some strong partnerships across all of those fronts, and we can bring the expertise together in all 3 of those areas. And we work across pretty much every vertical there is in our customer base, from the enterprise down to the SMB, right through the commercial space, and like I said, across all verticals. Great,
thanks. Let's talk about state of security today, Jay. And obviously, it's evolving rapidly, it's escalating rapidly, it's getting more complex. But, I think our joint view of this, Jay, is, the compounding problems that are facing organizations in this cyber landscape are really, increasing complexity of the environments that people are leveraging and having to defend, and escalating threats, increasing in frequency and sophistication against those more complex environments. Give folks on the call a little bit of your view of what this represents, both the size and scope, and the increasing scope and increasing nature of this problem.
Yeah, it's evolving rapidly, as you just said, right? And it's funny. I just read this really interesting article, and it kind of blew my mind. The headline in it was right to think about for a minute that cybercrime is estimated to cost the world 10 trillion annually in the next 18 months, and it will be more profitable than the illicit cross-border drug trade. And I mean, to think about that, and this stat really got me. If cybercrime was a country, it would have the third largest economy besides outside the U.S. and China. So a little tells a little story, right? It's evolving fastly, it's growing immensely, and organizations are up against it, right? You have this problem where organizations need to innovate, they need to evolve, but one of the problems is they have legacy systems that you still have to pay attention to those things and think about how you're going to patch those and how you're going to manage threats there. The attack surfaces are growing. There's no borders anymore, right, to organizations, and COVID really made that come on really quick. So what you're trying to protect is pretty much infinite now. And to think about the sophistication of the attacks and threats that are happening, those are getting more sophisticated. And like I like to tell our organization all the time, it's a daunting task. We got to be right every time. The bad guy's only going to be right once, right? So it's imperative that organizations start to think about cyber at a programmatic level, in a true risk to the organization, and not just as a technology solution.
I think it's a really good point. And the reason I'm interested in your perspectives here is because you're chartered with protecting your own organization and, in essence, practicing a little bit of what you preach to your clients, but also helping them develop, this cyber programmatic approach, or this thoughtful, sort of step-by-step programmatic approach to cybersecurity and the evolving threat there. So let's talk about a few of those tactics, and again, your perception here, or your perspective, is really important, because it's also, green pages, and what do you think about as an organization, and then how do you apply that to the strategies or the suggestions you make to your customers, or the solutions that you deploy. Let's talk about the first one on the list, assessing risk, preparing and prioritizing. And I think this is important, Jay, and maybe you can touch on it. Not all threats are equal, right? So how do you think about, what is risk, and how do you prioritize risk?
Yeah, so businesses have to start, traditionally businesses have thought about risk as, hey, financial risk, or risk they have going on in the organization, product risk, things like that, right? But cyber is probably the most predominant risk to a business. It's a business risk. It's not just a technology risk, right? And so what we try to advise our customers on is build a programmatic approach to cyber, right? Understand that matches your business. Understand what are the crown jewels of your organization, and really focus from the inside and work your way out, and build strong programs that really address how are you going to protect what is very important to your organization, because they're not all equal, right? I mean, I think of at organizations I've worked at, right, where we had companies' flaw data, right? So if you wanted to breach any of the world's biggest companies, and you could get that by breaching us, right? So that we had to know at all times that data was protected, how it was moving, every bit and byte, who accessed it, where it was going, right? So that's an example of, we understood deeply our business, and we understood deeply what were the crown jewels of the organization, and we understood that we have to spend a massive amount of time on, right? So we're gonna focus there and build programs in process and technology that is really, really fortified to ensure that can never, ever be breached. Now, we don't want any part of the organization getting breached, but if you think about, all right, we've got a marketing campaign or something, right? We're going to protect those sites, and we're going to do, we're going to spend a lot of time making sure they're secure, but does it have the same impact to our organization if that got hit, than as opposed to if those crown jewels of the organization got hit. So the organization really needs to rally around what is core to the organization, what's most important, and how do we fund and protect that in a very deep and meaningful way, and make sure everybody in the organization is sleeping and breathing that.
I think that's a good point. You know, we hear this term a lot, you know, crown jewels, and not all risks are the same. But in essence, what you're saying is, look, there are, you know, any breach is bad, but breaches against specific data, specific functions, specific systems, specific processes within an organization may have a greater impact as it relates to, you know, time to recover or damage, you know, from the breach, et cetera, than others. So understand in the business what's most important and make sure you're focused, you know, from that point out against the kind of the cyber profile, or the, you know, the attack surface of the organization, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, in practice, protecting it. And what I mean by that is, don't just sit back and think you have the defenses in place and we're good. We did this and we said it and we're good now, right?
Yeah.
Cyber is this thing that keeps evolving, right? And bad guys advance every day. So you have to advance every day. Your programs have to advance every day. Your understanding, your observability has to advance every day. Go on the offense a little bit, right? Don't sit back and wait for it. Go on the offense, understand where the weaknesses are in your environment before the bad guys exploit them.
So we've got a question related to this, Jay, that came in from Joel Nat. And let me ask it. And Joel, thanks for the question. But Joel asks, when assessing risk, Jay, how do you determine the importance of the organization's crown jewels? You know, at times, some systems have more important, you know, are more important than at other times. What guidance would you consider in identifying and prioritizing, you know, the systems or the crown jewels or whatever it is? How do you go about assessing that importance or prioritizing that importance?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about this as an exec team. We spend a lot of time talking about this at the board level, right? We want to make sure that we all agree and deeply understand what's the value of our organization and what's the value we're bringing to our customers, right? And once we deeply understand that, we can assess to say, okay, if that's the value of who we are, and we agree this is the monetary, the cultural value of the organization, then we can quickly understand from a technology point of view where that data resides and who has access and how we're going to control that and where we're going to spend and map budget against to make sure that's protected. We do that on an ongoing basis. When I go to a board meeting, the first part of the board meeting is this. It's all around cyber. It's all around risk. It's all around aligning on company value and where the value really resides in our organization.
Joel, appreciate the question. Keep them coming. If anybody else has any questions, type them in. We will get to them as we move forward. All right, so Jay, you know, the critical problem in all of this is really, you know, bad guys are evolving every day. You said it a minute ago. Sophistication is evolving every day. The incidents are evolving and increasing every day. Yet, you know, budgets aren't necessarily, you know, evolving to match that. And, you know, organizations don't have unlimited resources to pour, you know, into the fight against these issues. So this concept of doing more with less is, you know, is one of the most critical, in my mind, one of the most critical shortages in you know, in this fight. How do you think about, you know, having to do more with less, having to you know, to confront a larger and larger problem every year without necessarily, you know, a corresponding increase in budgets or capabilities or talent? What do you think through when you attack that problem?
Yeah, there's a couple things, right? So one, I'm constantly looking at technology that that the team can implement that provides automation, that provides really good observability, weeds out a lot of noises, takes action, has good automation to it, right? Because the team, you're right. It's not an infinite team. We've got massive amounts of threats coming at us. We need to really have good technology and good partners that understand what that landscape looks like, and that's constantly evolving. The other thing is, talent's really hard to find in this space, and there's a massive gap for it. I need to make sure that I'm attracting and retaining the talent I have. We do that by building a good environment where we're constantly educating our talent. We're constantly, bringing them up to the modern training and understanding what the landscape is constantly looking like. And the other thing is, I take an approach with our organization where security is not just the security team's obligation. You need to build a culture of I call them security champions at our organization. And you need to build this culture where everybody in the organization is thinking security. And they're thinking that because they understand how meaningful it is to the company, how meaningful it is to protecting our customers and protecting the assets of our organization. We do this through constant training. We talk about security at the top of every meeting. It's the number one priority of the organization, that when we get together as an exec team, we get together as a board, we get together at company meetings, security is front and center in that conversation. We are always talking it, we are always educating, and we're always expanding our organizational knowledge of it throughout the security team, throughout every employee in the organization.
Yeah, I think it's good practice, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, specifically the board. But before we get there, I think what you're preaching and what you're stitching together here is really this idea that your security posture is a constant and consistently evolving entity or thing. Talk about the security posture of an organization, and talk about what it takes to maintain and evolve that security posture over time.
Yes, good question. So our business is constantly evolving, like everybody else's business, right? So we need to constantly, we talked a little bit about this before, right? We need to constantly evolve our security program, right? To make sure that it's evolving as the business evolves, and to make sure that we're constantly, assessing our technology, we're constantly assessing our skills, we're constantly assessing our risk profile. We talked a little bit about it, right? I want to employ technology through the organization that can do a lot of the heavy lifting. So we bring technology in that it can take action for us based on really good observability, right? Because we understand, we talked about it earlier, we understand where our crown jewels of the organization are. We understand our assets, we understand our data, and we understand where those things live and how we want to control it. So we build really strong process and put automated technology around those. So therefore, the team can focus on the things that really raise the flag, right? And we do this, and when you have good observability across your infrastructure and across all of your environment, well, now we can go and get proactive and be threat hunters, right? I want the team out there. I don't want them spending a ton of time chasing down endless things that inevitably we could have automated out of the system, right? I want them spending their time really, what are the bad guys going to do? How are they going to get in? Where are when we see those things that raise the flag, let's go on a threat hunting exercises. Let's figure what those things are and close the gaps before the bad guys get to us, right? So it's an automated approach that we put automation at the front of it with really good observability, and we focus the team on the big ticket things. And like I said, it's a cultural thing, right? This is something that it's evolving. I don't ever want the team or the organization or any organization we advise or do work for to rest on their laurels. All right, I implemented this today, I'm good, I'll come back and check on it in a month, right? You got to get better every day.
Yeah. I think this is really important, and it's obviously, the core of the value that NetEnrich brings to the market, and that NetEnrich thinks about of our own internal security posture. This concept of, differentiating between and again, I think, it's my perspective that one of the big challenges in this business, Jay, is that, security teams, security operations teams, security analysts, security operators are just getting absolutely bombarded with signals, and signals in of themselves are very hard to sort of understand what's important, what's not important. And one of the stressors in the business is these people, these security professionals, are under so much pressure to determine, of all this signal noise coming into me, what do I need to pay attention to first? How do I prioritize my response? What's real? What isn't? What's significant? What isn't? I think that's a real problem. So you talked about a couple of things. We touched on this idea of observability, this idea of using analytics and using insights to generate actionable intelligence, the ability to help an analyst or help a security professional distinguish what are they seeing, what is the potential impact, what are they seeing coming in, how to prioritize the response. I think that's really important. And you've mentioned a couple of things. Certainly automation is part of that, predictability is part of that, but this idea that human beings are catching, or need to catch these issues, and the information has to be organized in a manner in which they can decipher what is my response going to be and how am I going to respond, and more importantly, what do I prioritize my response to? Do you agree with that? Is that as critical as we think it is?
Absolutely, it's really, really critical, right? Because when you look at a lot of breaches happen, and there were alerts, but there was alert fatigue, right? There was a team that just had so many things coming at them. They were so burnt out that it just got mixed in with all the other alerts, right? So I want systems in places, and I want that observability and that automation, that when one of these makes it through to the team, the core team that really understands deeply the security that needs to be provided, that when they get hit with that they're on it. That's real, and it's all hands on deck, right? And everybody is working towards, shutting those things down, right? Because time matters in breaches, right? Time is, it's the enemy, right? So it's really, really important that you weed out the noise, right? Because that fatigue sets in really rapidly on teams. Agreed.
I think it's one of the main stressors in this industry is just the amount of noise people are sifting through.
Yeah, the burnout rate is crazy.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you've mentioned this a couple of times. This concept of a program in an organization, a program within a company. Let's talk about a cybersecurity program, and maybe you can articulate some specifics there. Obviously, you're talking about security. You said things like testing, the program and testing the individuals within an organization against the program. Can you articulate a little bit some of the detail on what you mean by program and some of the elements of that program?
Yeah. So when I think of cybersecurity and the program we're building, right, I think of that in a way that is, okay, how is it going to be most impactful for whatever organization we're working with, or in this case, our own organization, right? So we build a program that encompasses everybody in the organization, right? We make sure we have good thought leadership. We have people that understand cyber, right? We understand our critical assets. We understand where they are, and we understand who needs access to them. And then we understand that, hey, we work in a world where people are going out and bringing things in all the time, right? So we want to make sure they're educated. So part of our program, when we put controls in place, when we put technology in places, we explain why, right? People ultimately, if you explain why and you take them through the understanding of what the importance of that is to the organization, by and large, they want to be good stewards of that, right? They want to participate in that, and they want to help fortify the organization, right? So when we build a program, it's all of those things we talked about. It's process, it's technology, it's training of people. And I'm a big sports guy, right? So I have this motto: let's practice like we play. So we do tabletop exercises, and these are not tabletop exercises where we announce the company weeks before and everybody come together. This is what it's going to be about. When we do a tabletop, company doesn't know we're doing a tabletop. We hit a scenario and we look to see, did people follow the processes, right? Were there holes in the processes that we got to remediate? Did technology catch and automate the things we thought it was going to do, right? Could we recover from the attack that we simulated happen, right? Did we have the ability to do that? Did we have the know-how? We time ourselves on that, right? It's after the fact, when we're retroing, that we say this was a tabletop, right? So we want to because people act differently under stress, right? And you're going to make different decisions. We want that to be as real as possible, right? We constantly do micro training with our organization, right? To enhance their understanding of cyber and the risk, that what's their responsibility in the chain of that risk.
So basically, you're not telling them it's a drill until it's over. Then you tell them it was a drill. Got it.
That's right. You know, I mean, the very first time we did it, I didn't have a lot of friends after, right? But the organization, after they wrapped their head around that, we made massive improvements, right? And this is what we do with other organizations. When they come out of it, you do a couple of those, it's unbelievable how quick you can get things resolved.
Yeah, I can imagine, obviously an organization doesn't want to necessarily, see how poorly they perform, but, they don't, they can rapidly improve after that. So it might be humbling, but you're able to identify and address the gaps in that. And you should be able to see accelerated improvement, as you go. I think it's a really good idea.
I'm a firm believer transparency is the great equalizer in cybersecurity, right? A lot of people want to cover that up and hide the warts, where I say, shine a bright light on the warts, right? Because you've got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to eradicate those things, right? Hiding them is only going to get them exposed at a different time.
I want to move to the next concept, and you're the one that sort of brought this to something that I hadn't really thought about it in this context. This concept of security goes all the way up to the board and aligning with the board. Walk me through what you mean by that, and what is the significance of the board's overview or board's insight and alignment on the security posture?
Yeah, I think this is critically important, right? So ultimately, funding happens at the board level, right? And cyber needs to, the board needs to understand, hey, you've agreed these are the goals, and these are really the really important things from a financial perspective for the organization. Well, cyber is the biggest risk in that, right? It's the biggest risk we have, business risk we have. That needs to be front and center at the board, so the board understands those risks as they're talking about funding, as they're talking about valuation, as they're talking about where it is that the organization's moving and going, right? So they need to understand those risks. And I'm a firm believer that, and you're seeing more and more of this, there's a lot of articles coming out on it, that board's going to have requirements that cyber expertise has to sit on the boards, because it's costing companies so much money that not having that alignment to the board. And what I do is I'm that cyber expert that sits on our company's board. I make sure that when I present to the board, I present it and I visualize it. And what I mean by that is I present heat maps, right? And I align those heat maps to core fundamental business outcomes we want to achieve. And then I assign risk scores on a heat map to what are the cyber risks that are standing in the way of that. So then the board, I can now sit with the board, they can visualize and see the progress. So they can actually tie the funding that we've decided as an exec team and a board that is needed to move our cyber posture. They can tie that funding to those heat maps to see our progress in those areas, to make sure those are constantly aligned to the business outcomes we're trying to achieve. And when that happens, all of a sudden, it's amazing how much sand in the gears gets removed from the gears on the security front, right? Because these are business conversations, they're business outcomes that security is driving.
I think this idea of, the risk of not doing something, or what is the potential risk if we don't change, I think is really important in that discussion. But that's a really interesting concept. And I don't know how many people out there are actively, working into their security program, this concept of aligning with the board and including the board in that. So I think it's a really good suggestion.
It is actually the first thing we hit at every board meeting now, right? It's the upfront. Let's understand this. Let's spend time on it. Let's make sure we're making progress, and let's make sure we're tying the funding to it.
So, we've talked about a lot of concepts here. Obviously, like anything in cyber, Jay, this can be overwhelming. There's a lot to be worried about. There's a lot to pay attention to. There's a lot to be thinking about and putting into plan here. What are some of the call to actions that you would suggest for folks, as they think through, how do I take some of these concepts and actually put them to work in my business, and take some of what Jay is talking about and actually, deploy it in my organization? Where would you start?
Yeah, so it's an overwhelming thing, right? If you look at it, all of it at once, it's very overwhelming. What I try to help customers with is, as we build out a programmatic approach for them, let's talk about some things that are not so overwhelming that can make a huge difference in organizations, right? Let's build some really good, strong, basic fundamentals throughout the organization, right? Let's make sure we have good asset management. Let's make sure we have immutable backups, right? So we can recover the things we need to recover. Let's understand where the assets are. Let's have good password policies and patching policies, right? Let's have start implementing zero trust, right? These are pretty fundamental security tactics that go a long way. So as you start to build out a program, these things become natural, right? The low-hanging fruit, it's still crazy how many organizations get hit off of just poor security hygiene, right? A lot of those things are really, really preventable. And be transparent in it, right? I can't emphasize enough. Be transparent in your security journey. Be transparent with where you actually are today and where you need to be. And then build these programs, right? And like I said, start with the low-hanging fruit. It will go a long way as you go up the chain of security.
And for folks on the webinar, we're going to send this out at the conclusion of the webinar with these links in it. So it'll give you some sense of some of the resources available to you, some tips and tricks. So the links will be live on the document that you get. So you'll get a lot of this information as a follow-up. Okay, Jay, last, kind of parting, suggestions or advice to folks as they start thinking about these security programs. And then I'll ask another question we're getting from the audience here. But what are some of your parting thoughts around resources that you think are valuable, other than those listed here? Other places people can go for help? Where people can start if this is the kind of the first time they've started thinking about a security in a programmatic fashion. What would you suggest?
Yeah, a couple things. Rally around there's so many frameworks out there. There's so much information out there, right? Rally, like NIST is a good framework, right? If you don't have anything, right, start to build something around NIST, right? It's very doable. It's easy to understand. You can put a solid program in place, right? You can always evolve, right? So build something off a good solid foundation, a good framework like that, right? And like I said earlier, continually evolve it. Don't every day try to make it better, try to get better, right? And all of these things in security. Every day, I try to, we at the end of we practice Agile even in security, right? So we say at the end of the week, when we started the week, here's the 10 things that are critical we accomplished this week. And we meet as a team and we talk about, did we accomplish them? What were if we didn't, what were the roadblocks to accomplishing those? So then I can, as the CISO, I can eradicate those roadblocks out of the organization or whatever it was, so we can continue to move forward every single day and every single week.
Sorry, Jay, the question we're getting from the audience that I mentioned a minute ago was asked is, what are some of the objections that customers have, when you are proposing solutions to a customer. When you're working with a customer on cyber risk and solutions and programmatic issues, where are you getting objections? You would think that obviously people don't have unlimited funds or unlimited resources, so they can't buy everything that somebody pitches to them. But in general, what are some of the overarching, objections that people are giving you when they can't proceed with something or they decide against it? What are some of the underlying reasons they may be objecting, and how are you getting around those?
Yeah, I find a lot of times there's a couple, right? I try to go in, and the team goes in, we go in very tech agnostic, right? Because that can lead to real religious battles right out of the gate, right? There's a lot of tech that does a lot of good things, right? But what I try to say, let's forget the tech name when those objections come up. Let's talk about what are the business outcomes, and does the tech support the processes that are going to deliver those business outcomes? That will decide the tech, right? And so let's not have religious wars about that. That you meet a roadblock there sometimes, right? And that's how we get around those. And the other one is, people are really nervous about, they think it's a bad look that they've got vulnerabilities, they've got holes in the environment. This is going to look bad on me. And when I try to educate our customers on, you're not alone, right? You're with every single other person, every single other CIO and CISO in the world that has these as well, right? There's no such thing as perfect, right? So I try to encourage people to get over that, right? Because it's the opposite of that. It's what I've been preaching. You really want to help the organization understand where they are and give transparency to that. Don't take that. I see so many CISOs and CIOs fail because they want to take that all on themselves, and it's an impossible task, right? And don't be the hero and the scapegoat in all of that, right? Make sure you're being transparent, because that transparency is what's going to align to the business funding and the business objectives and the business outcomes.
Last question we got, again from Joel. How does your organization, Jay, share experiences they encounter from one customer to another? Keeping the confidential nature of the initial customer, confidential. How do you do that? And how do you share best practices without compromising that confidentiality?
Yeah, so great question, right? The fortunate seat we sit in, right? We're an MSP as well, right? Managed service provider, right? So we are providing managed services for a lot of organizations, cloud, on-prem infrastructures, endpoints, and we are their MSSP as well, right? So we're seeing and gathering a lot of different info, right? We have tools and platforms we use that have a ton of telemetry in those, right? So when we see something coming through one customer, we understand the landscape of our other customers, and we can say, hey, that's probably going to be meaningful to this sector of our customers, higher ed, whatever it is, right? Let's have a conversation with them to make sure they have the right things in place. We will never disclose another customer or who that was, but we can say, hey, we're seeing these type of incidents come across. We're seeing these type of incidents out in the wild. We want to make sure you guys understand what that means. We want to make sure you guys are prepared for that. And we can go have that conversation with them in a very meaningful way.
I think it's good advice, and I think that knowledge sharing is critical in this fight, right?
I think that's the power of, I think that's the power of why you move to an MSP or MSSP. We've got lots of depth and we've got lots of breadth, right? So we see lots and lots of things across the entire globe and across all the different verticals. And that's meaningful, right? Because when we have that type of info and data, we can make that really meaningful for all of our customers.
I agree. All right, Jay. Hey, really appreciate your time and your expertise and your insight. I think it's a unique perspective, both internal and external to customers. For those on the call, we're going to send out the recording with this document and the links there. I would encourage you, if you have additional questions or you want to bounce ideas around, both Jay and myself are welcome to kind of share our experience, share what we're seeing out there, share what we're doing. If you've got, challenges that you're trying to solve for customers, or you've got, specific situations you want to talk through, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to have a conversation, if only just to share what we've seen or what's going on. Thank you to Jay. Thank you to everybody that joined. Appreciate you spending some time with us. And again, we will send out this link, this documentation to everybody that was on the call, so you'll have access to the links and you can take a look at the resources that we suggested. But I appreciate it, Jay. Good luck to your team down in Florida. Hope everything's going to be okay. And I really appreciate the time. Thanks for the partnership.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for participating. I love having these conversations, right? So really appreciate the opportunity to do it today.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.